In our call last week, I will reject all attempts to weaken Canada.
The United States just threw down the gauntlet, and Canada's not picking it up. As Washington gears up to slap a 35% tariff on Canadian steel, auto parts, and lumber starting August 1st, Prime Minister Mark Carney has drawn a line in the frost. No deal is worth sacrificing Canada's dignity. This isn't the polite, deferential Canada you might expect. It's a nation standing firm, refusing to bend under pressure from its biggest neighbor. With $35 billion in exports and 2.3 million jobs on the line, this standoff is more than a trade dispute. It's a test of sovereignty, a clash of wills, and a gamble on who blinks first. Is Canada's defiance a bold new chapter or a risky bet that could cost billions? Let's dive into the stakes and see what happens when a smaller nation decides it's done playing by the giant's rules. For years, the US has been the linchpin of North American trade. Its market's a lifeline for Canadian goods like steel, cars, and timber. In 2024, those exports to the US totaled $762 billion, supporting millions of jobs across Ontario, Alberta, and beyond. But now, President Trump's threat of a 35% tariff on nearly everything Canada sends south, $14 billion in steel, $23 billion in auto parts, $6 billion in lumber, has turned that lifeline into a chokehold. The move, announced with Trump's signature flair, isn't just about economics. It's a power play, a demand for Canada to fall in line or pay the price. But Carney, a former Bank of England governor with a knack for cool-headed strategy, isn't biting. From a quiet summit in Huntsville, Ontario, on July 22, 2025, he sent a clear message: Canada won't sign a deal that compromises its future just to keep the US happy. It's a stance that's as much about pride as it is about policy. What's driving Carney's resolve? Picture a chessboard where one player keeps rewriting the rules mid-game. Trump's tariffs aren't just a tax, they're a demand for concessions, from relocating factories to aligning with US priorities. For Canada, agreeing to those terms would mean surrendering more than market access. It would mean ceding control. Carney, ever the calculated player, sees the bigger picture. A Yale study warns that these tariffs could shave 2.11% off Canada's economy, a hit deeper than any other country studied. That's not just a number. It's 2.3 million jobs at risk, from steelworkers in Hamilton to loggers in British Columbia. Yet Carney's not backing down. He's betting that the US needs Canada's goods as much as Canada needs US markets. It's a high-stakes wager, but it's rooted in a simple truth. Giving in now could cost Canada its independence later. The Huntsville summit wasn't just talk, it was a turning point. While Washington waved its tariff threat like a club, Canada's provincial leaders, from Doug Ford in Ontario to Danielle Smith in Alberta, rallied behind Carney's stand. They're not cheering from the rooftops, but they're on board, knowing their province's economies. Steel in Ontario, oil and lumber in Alberta depend on holding firm. Carney's mantra, "No deal is better than a bad deal," isn't just rhetoric, it's a blueprint. Canada's not just bracing for impact, it's building a future that doesn't hinge on US approval. On June 26, 2025, Carney pushed through Bill C-5, the One Canadian Economy Act, a game-changer that tears down trade barriers between provinces and fast-tracks infrastructure like pipelines, rails, and ports. It's a bold move to make Canada's economy more self-reliant, using Ontario steel for new pipelines and coastal ports to ship minerals without begging for US clearance. The irony is delicious. Trump's tariffs were meant to strong-arm Canada, but they've sparked a Canadian renaissance instead. Bill C-5 isn't just about roads and rails, it's about cutting the strings tying Canada to the US market. By streamlining internal trade and speeding up projects, Canada is creating supply chains that don't need to cross the border. New pipelines will carry Alberta oil to Canadian ports, not US refineries. Rail upgrades will move critical minerals to global markets without a US customs stamp. And it's not just domestic. Over 80 countries have reached out to Ottawa since the tariff threats began, eager to sign trade deals. Carney's team estimates that breaking down interprovincial barriers could add $200 billion to Canada's GDP, turning a crisis into an opportunity. While the US plays hardball, Canada's quietly rewriting the rules of the game. But it's not all smooth sailing. Critics, especially some First Nations groups, argue that Bill C-5 rushes projects without proper consultation, and legal challenges are already brewing. Carney's response is blunt: the economy can't wait. Speed and unity are the priority, even if it means ruffling feathers. It's a gamble, but it's one Canada's willing to take. The alternative, bowing to U.S. demands, would mean trading short-term relief for long-term dependence. Carney's not just saying no to bad deals, he's saying yes to a Canada that stands on its own, and the world's taking notice. From Europe to Asia, nations are lining up to partner with a country that's selling stability while the U.S. sells chaos. The Wall Street Journal called it a strategic decoupling, a pivot that could make Canada less reliant on its southern neighbor and more connected to the globe. What happens next? There are three paths forward, each with its own risks and rewards. First, the tariffs hit full force on August 1st. The U.S. slams Canada with a 35% levy, and Canada retaliates in kind. Steel, autos, and lumber take the brunt, threatening 2.3 million jobs and shrinking Canada's economy. But Canada doubles down on Bill C-5, building domestic strength and new trade ties to weather the storm. The U.S. feels the pain. Two tariffs could cost American households $2,700 a year and wipe out 540,000 to 600,000 U.S. jobs, according to Yale's projections. It's a mutual hit, but Canada's betting it can outlast the U.S. Second, a temporary truce emerges. Global pressure, maybe from the G7, forces Trump to ease up. Talks drag on, but uncertainty lingers, dampening investment on both sides of the border. Canada keeps diversifying, signing deals with Europe for machinery and Asia for energy, chipping away at U.S. leverage. Third, Canada signs a deal before the deadline, avoiding tariffs but at a cost. Concessions could weaken Canada's global alliances and limit its newfound autonomy, trading short-term peace for long-term limits. Carney's message cuts through all three scenarios like a knife. Canada's chasing dignity, not deadlines. This isn't about dodging tariffs, it's about redefining what Canada stands for. While Trump's threats turn trade into theater, Carney's playing a longer game, building bridges to new markets and bolstering Canada's own backyard. The Canadian Parliamentary Budget Office warns that a full tariff war could erase 180,000 jobs by early 2026, a gut punch to communities from coast to coast. But giving in carries a steeper price, one that doesn't show up in spreadsheets. It's the loss of sovereignty, the slow erosion of a nation's ability to chart its own course. Carney's made his choice clear. Canada's not for sale. South of the border, the picture's no rosier. U.S. consumers are staring down higher prices as tariffs drive up the cost of everything from cars to lumber. The U.S. economy could lose nearly a percentage point of GDP growth, and Midwestern towns tied to Canadian supply chains are bracing for layoffs. This isn't the America First victory Trump promised. It's a reminder that bullying your closest ally comes with a cost. Canada's response isn't loud or flashy. It's methodical, deliberate, and relentless. While Washington measures strength in ultimatums, Ottawa's measuring it in new ports, new trade deals, and a refusal to bend. Carney's turned a tariff threat into a global opportunity, proving that real power lies not in how loudly you shout, but in what you're willing to stand for. This is more than a trade spat. It's an identity test. Do you trade your principles for market access? Do you kneel to save a few billion? Canada's answer is written in the steel of its new pipelines, the rails of its upgraded ports, and the resolve of a leader who knows when to walk away. The U.S. might still hold the bigger economy, but Canada's playing a different game, one where sovereignty trumps submission as the August 1st deadline looms. The question isn't just about tariffs or trade deals. It's about what Canada's willing to pay for its independence, and whether the U.S. can afford to keep pushing its neighbor away. What's the price of dignity in a world where trade is a weapon? And more importantly, is Canada's stand a blueprint for others to follow? The world's watching, and the answer could change the balance of power in North America for good.